Robert had built his fortune through decades of 12-hour days and weekend meetings, but success had come at a price that only became clear when his wife Sarah passed away 3 years ago, leaving him to raise their 8-year-old son Daniel alone. Daniel was different from other children in ways that both broke and mended his father's heart every single day. The boy had never spoken a word, though his eyes held depths of understanding that sometimes took Robert's breath away. Medical experts had offered various explanations and treatments, but none had unlocked the mystery of Daniel's silence. On this particular Saturday morning, Robert decided to take Daniel to their usual breakfast spot downtown. It was a small diner called Martha's Kitchen, where the coffee was strong and the pancakes reminded Robert of Sunday mornings from his own childhood. The familiar routine brought comfort to both father and son, even when words weren't shared between them. They settled into their regular booth by the window where Daniel could watch the pigeons gather on the sidewalk outside. Robert ordered their usual breakfast and opened his newspaper. Though he found himself watching Daniel more than reading, the boy's attention was drawn to something across the room, and Robert followed his gaze to see their waitress. Her name was Grace according to her worn name tag, and she appeared to be in her early 30s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She moved between tables with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been serving others for many years. When she brought their order, her smile was genuine and warm. "Good morning, sweethearts," Grace said as she set down their plates. "Daniel, honey, I brought you extra syrup because I remember how much you like it." What happened next made Robert's coffee cup pause halfway to his lips. Grace knelt down beside Daniel's chair and began speaking to him in a way that was completely different from how most adults addressed his son. She didn't speak louder or slower, but instead used her hands and facial expressions in ways that seemed to create a bridge between her words and Daniel's understanding. "You know what, Daniel," Grace said while demonstrating with her hands, "I learned something new yesterday about how birds talk to each other. They don't just use sounds like we do, they move their bodies and flutter their wings to say hello and goodbye." Daniel's eyes grew wide with interest, and for the first time in months Robert saw his son lean forward with complete attention. Grace continued her gentle demonstration, showing how birds might greet each other with wing movements and head tilts. To Robert's amazement, Daniel began mimicking some of the gestures. "That's exactly right," Grace encouraged. "You're such a good listener, Daniel. Your daddy must be very proud of how smart you are." Robert felt something shift in his chest as he watched this interaction. Grace wasn't trying to make Daniel speak or behave differently. She was simply meeting him exactly where he was and finding ways to connect through understanding rather than expectation. Over the following weeks, Robert found himself looking forward to their Saturday morning visits to Martha's Kitchen in ways he hadn't anticipated. Grace always had time for Daniel, and her patience seemed infinite. She would show him how to fold napkins into different shapes or demonstrate how to make the salt and pepper shakers dance together. One morning Robert arrived at the diner earlier than usual and overheard Grace talking to another waitress. "That little boy touches my heart," Grace was saying. "He reminds me so much of my own grandson Tommy, who lives with his mother in California. Tommy doesn't speak much either, but he has the same beautiful way of seeing the world. I just want Daniel to know that he's perfect exactly as he is." Robert realized in that moment that Grace's kindness toward Daniel wasn't pity or professional courtesy. It was genuine love from someone who understood that different doesn't mean less than. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday morning when Robert decided to surprise Daniel with an unexpected visit to the diner. Grace was training a new waitress, and Robert watched as she demonstrated the same patient kindness with her colleague that she showed to Daniel. "Everyone learns differently," Grace explained to the younger woman. "Some people need to see something done several times and others need to try it themselves first. The important thing is to be patient and remember that we're all just doing our best." Daniel had been listening from their booth, and suddenly he stood up and walked over to where Grace was standing. Robert held his breath as his son reached out and tugged gently on Grace's apron. Grace turned around and knelt down to Daniel's level as she always did. "Hello there, sweetheart," she said. "What can I do for you?" Daniel looked into her eyes and in a voice that was soft but clear as morning sunlight he said, "Thank you, Grace." The entire diner seemed to pause in that moment. Robert felt tears he didn't know were coming blur his vision as his son spoke his first words, not to demand something or express frustration but to thank someone who had shown him unconditional kindness. Grace's eyes filled with tears as she gathered Daniel into a gentle hug. "Oh honey," she whispered, "thank you too. You've taught me so much about seeing the world in new ways." Robert approached them slowly, still hardly believing what he had witnessed. "Grace," he said, "I don't know how to properly thank you for what you've done for Daniel and for me. You've shown us both what real kindness looks like." Grace stood up and smiled at Robert with the same warmth she had always shown Daniel. "Mr. Robert," she said, "your son has been teaching me things too. He's shown me that communication isn't just about words, it's about understanding and patience and meeting people where they are. I should be thanking both of you." That afternoon Robert made several phone calls. In the weeks that followed, Martha's Kitchen received an anonymous donation that allowed them to renovate their dining room and increase wages for all employees. Grace also received a letter informing her that a scholarship fund had been established in Daniel's name to help train educators who work with children who learn differently. But more importantly, Robert began volunteering at local organizations that supported families with special needs children. He shared Daniel's story not as inspiration but as a reminder that every child has something valuable to offer when met with understanding and acceptance. Daniel continued to speak, though never as much as other children his age. His words remained precious and carefully chosen. Grace became like family to them, attending Daniel's school performances and birthday celebrations. She never took credit for Daniel finding his voice, instead insisting that he had simply been waiting for the right moment and the right encouragement. Years later, when Daniel graduated from high school with honors in art and design, he gave a speech about the importance of patience and understanding. He spoke about a waitress who had taught him that communication comes in many forms and that kindness is the most important language of all. Robert watched his son from the audience, remembering that morning when Grace had first knelt down beside their booth. He thought about how one person's genuine caring had changed the trajectory of their entire lives, not through grand gestures but through consistent small acts of understanding and acceptance. Grace was there in the audience too, now retired but still the same warm presence who had first shown them both what it meant to truly see and value another person. Daniel found her after the ceremony and hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Grace," he said, "just as he had that first morning, for teaching me that I was enough just as I was." Sometimes the most profound changes in our lives come not from dramatic moments but from the quiet persistence of someone who chooses to show up with kindness day after day. Grace had done exactly that, and in doing so had taught a father and son that love often speaks loudest in the gentle spaces between words.